impossible. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is inadequate for the government of any other. Do you follow this? And this, it concerns me greatly. And right now, in fact, this next week I have 2 radio shows on this one topic right here, and that is the movement towards a libertarian view. I'm telling you, and I watch in churches and places where I speak, we got Christians by the truckloads now running over to jump on the bandwagon of libertarianism. And you've got to understand that libertarianism has at its base a foundation in atheism. It really comes out of the French Revolution. You had 2 revolutions taking place: the American Revolution, the French Revolution. The American Revolution is one that was radical. It acknowledged God. It acknowledged that all of us are created equal, that we are endowed by our Creator certain untouchable rights. It was the American Revolution. And one guy, very interesting, one guy that was right in the middle of all that is a guy named Thomas Paine. He was leading the charge. You probably remember Thomas Paine was leading the charge. He was one of the guys that was a major initiator in the early days of the American Revolution. Then he went to France, visited France, got a hold of what was happening in France with the French Revolution, where they were trying to put forth freedom without the inalienable rights, without God, just liberty, that man has the capacity to govern himself apart from God. That's the French Revolution. It was atheistic. And so Thomas Paine, after visiting France, he came back to America. In fact, he wrote a book. And he submitted it. Catch this. He submitted his book to his friend, Benjamin Franklin, who we all know is among the most ungodly, is what we're told, of our founders. Thomas Paine sent his book to Franklin, said, read this before I publish it and get it out in public. Franklin wrote him back and said, the best thing you can do with this book is burn it. Because he was espousing liberty without God. He was saying we need to get God out of all this talk that we're doing and trying to establish our nation. It doesn't belong. And he started espousing the principles of the French Revolution. And even the most secular among us, Ben Franklin said, the best thing you can do with this thing is trash it, burn it, throw it away. Do you know Thomas Paine ended up, y'all, do you realize that he was so rejected by our founders, so rejected by our entire culture at that time. Thomas Paine died a pauper. He was buried in a field because a church would not allow his body to be buried in a church ceremony or in a church cemetery. Majorly rejected. Our founders, and y'all, that's the roots of libertarianism. It is liberty, liberty, liberty with no boundaries, which is chaos, anarchy. Our Constitution was written for a moral and religious people under the guidelines of right and wrong. And apart from that, you cannot have liberty without absolute chaos and anarchy and destruction. And so when you start looking, y'all listen, I listen to some of the libertarian stuff, and probably 70% of it, I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. But the other 30% of it totally is foreign to our American way of life. It is dangerous. It will lead us to absolute collapse.